What we're doing is looking at the situation where the Earth is withering away, and we're trying to reflect on this and to come up with a creative response. Say, really nothing is more important in our moment than an adjustment or a change or a transformation of ourselves, but of the human endeavor altogether to change in a way so that life might once again flourish. And the orientation we're exploring here is that the way in which we normally think about ourselves as Democrats or as working for a particular corporation or as family members, all these ways are valid, but they're ultimately too small for the challenges we have before us. So it's a challenge of understanding what it means to be human in a way that can more easily respond to what we have before us. And so what would be the context we can begin to imagine our future in? And the idea here is that it's not enough to think of ourselves as being in the context of a particular nation or even a particular culture, even a particular civilization. All these are too small. And certainly of a particular corporation, way too small. But what if we took as our context the whole Earth, the planet, the whole, even the universe itself? What if we began to think of ourselves as being primarily cosmological beings? We're religious, we're political, we're economic, we're all of these things. But in a more fundamental way, we are cosmological, more fundamentally. And then, if that is our basic focus, then we ask, what is our role then in the midst of all this? So we have all these roles that we're given to play out. And we have to be breadwinners, and we have to be fathers and mothers, we have to be good citizens, we have all these different roles. All of them are important, but what's the most basic role for the human? What is it? And to answer that question is going to determine how we're going to use our energy in the future. And so it's always worth stopping and asking yourself, would the universe work for 13.7 billion years to create consumers? Is that really what it's about? It's just that simple. Is that what it's about? So once you ask the larger question in terms of the universe, the smaller little roles start to themselves fall away. And the idea we'd like to explore here is perhaps the role of the human is to enable the creative powers of the universe to proceed in a new and more mutually enhancing way. Maybe that really is our role, is to enable these powers that have been at work forever, to enable them to enter a new form. And what that form might be and how to proceed, that's the question. Maybe it's something deeper and more important than being a consumer or being a nation that has all these rights to oil or whatever. Is there something deeper we're involved with? And can we find our way into that by paying attention to what the universe is doing? That's the question. Rather than going to legal documents, political documents, sacred documents, all important. What if we just went to the universe and said, what's going on? And how can we participate in that? The particular power we're going to look at today is the power of centration. Centration, I guess it is in the dictionary, but it's a way of talking about how the universe centers on itself. It doesn't necessarily have to follow that if you have a universe, the universe centers on itself. But our universe does. And so we want to explore that and get a sense of how the universe centers on itself, and ask how can we participate in that. That's the whole lecture right there in a sentence. Some examples of centration would be, here's the early universe, and the universe it's billowing out because there's so much energy, there's so much heat. And so as it billows out, it actually increases the gravitational potential energy. Because if you have, prop, right. So you have this, if you let go of this right here, it's going to hit the table with a certain kind of force. But if you lift it all the way up here, and let go of it, it's really going to hit the table. So as the universe billows out, the gravitational potential energy is increasing. And we get to a situation, that could be the whole story. Start off with the universe, it's real hot, it billows out, that's it. But you get to instabilities. And instead of just the universe remaining like this great expanding cloud, it fractures apart into a multiplicity of centers, each of which becomes a galaxy. So there's the first major moment when the universe centers upon itself as a galaxy. It doesn't stay just as a cloud of atoms. It breaks apart into these individual galaxies. There they are. Let me go into one of the galaxies and look at the dynamics there. All sorts of things are happening. Things are moving this way and that way. And the gravitational interaction, all this power is taking place. But there, too, the galactic cloud breaks apart into a multiplicity of centers. And each of these centers becomes a star. So you just see this universe like wanting to get to a new center, a galaxy. And then inside the new center, wanting to get to a new center, a star. Now, to use the phrase the universe wants to, it causes like intense pain, for a modern consciousness. It's just like, it's intense pain because you're not sure if you're in the presence of someone who's sane or not. The universe wants to. So that we're going to talk about this actually in the eighth power of transformation in some detail. But I am actually wanting to suggest that we can make sense of the statement that a system has its own intrinsic and desired ends. It's moving toward a certain set of end states. And so there isn't, and I say the universe wants to center upon itself, there isn't like a large human out there somewhere wanting this. It's rather that the dynamics of the universe themselves are leaning in a particular direction. That's what we're exploring. And I'm using the phrase the universe wants to center on itself to talk about the way in which the dynamics of the universe are leaning in a direction. They may not even get there, but they're biased and they're tilted that way. So it is, given the dynamics of the gravitational interaction, it was inevitable that the universe would end up as galaxies. That's what I mean. I said the universe wants to center upon itself. So, but I want you to sort of get a feel for how we can use that language, even though it sounds like I'm talking about a large human. I'm not. I'm doing the best I can to talk about something that we're not familiar with. We, modern industrial humans, are not familiar with the idea that the whole has its own intrinsic directions. We do not take that in easily. And we're the culture that believes intensely in individuals. We don't. It's harder for us to get a sense of the whole as being real and having its own direction. So we have this universe, going for centers, galaxy, star. Now, if we go ahead and look further and look at the early Earth and the action that's taking place on the surface of the early Earth, in particular in the watery world of ponds and lakes and rivers, all kinds of activities at the chemical level. So chemical elements are interacting with one another, all kinds. And so you have the sea of interaction, but that too breaks apart into centers. I mean, again, you can imagine the universe just being this big cloud that just continues to expand and do these various things. It doesn't have to become a center, but it becomes a center. Likewise, you can imagine the early seas of the Earth just have these various interactions taking place. But no, it doesn't remain in that more haphazard, chaotic, random state. The system itself moves towards centers, and these centers eventually reach the sophisticated state that we call a cell. The cell, in a certain sense, in our understanding in complexity science, is an inevitability of a planet like Earth. It's the dynamics itself. They're moving towards these centers. The centers become more and more intense. And the way in which they intensify is also of interest, I think, for our reflections as humans. I just picked out two that I find fascinating that may be of assistance when we think about the human situation. You have this chemical interaction taking place, and you have complexity rising, but then it falls down as the chaos of the sea breaks it apart until there is the invention of the membrane. It's awesome. The membrane enables these complex formations to withstand the onslaught of the chaotic sea. And the creativity can be maintained through time. And so it isn't lost. The phrase is, in science, life ratchets up by holding on to what it's achieved. And the other dynamic that shows up here is that of the catalyst. The catalyst is a molecule that actually accelerates the process. And it's those centers that found a way to protect themselves and to accelerate their process became the basis for life. I mean, if you go back at that time, even to the early seas, before there is actually life, and you have this interaction taking place, and I mean, things could go a variety of different ways, but it was the membrane and the catalyst in particular, the preservation of complex realities and the acceleration, amplification of those activities that determined the future. So now I move forward, last example, really just to give you a feel for this power of centration. So once again, life could have just stayed right there at the level of these individual cells, and they'd go through all their different transformations and adventures. But no, life pushed ahead into multicellular beings, which we'll discuss in the sixth power. But when you have these multicellular beings, say animals, another amazing thing takes place: the birth of animal consciousness. Now, animal consciousness exists in all these different millions of species of animals. And what's incredible is that each form of animal consciousness, whether you're talking about a dog or a horse or a giraffe or a whale, each form is unique and wonderful. They're all just fantastic, right? But they all share a similar quality. All of the forms of animal consciousness are focused on particular tasks. They're centered on making sure they acquire nourishment for themselves and for their near at hand. And they're centered on the challenge of raising the young to sexual maturity in different ways. But you see, here's what's so incredible. You can have all kinds of animal consciousness, but all the animal consciousness you have will be centered upon these particular challenges by the nature of life's dynamics. It's not possible, given natural selection, not possible to have the other forms that you can sort of imagine arbitrarily. Well, yeah, animal consciousness could be something just sort of kicks back and likes everyone and gives equal time to everyone who comes along. I mean, it didn't happen. Or if it happened, that form of life is long gone. So again, see the universe centering upon itself in these ways. Now, we come to the human. And so then the question is this: how is the universe centering upon humanity? How is the universe centering upon individual humans? That's the question we have to ask. The challenge before us is not to get the universe to center on us. That's already the case. The challenge is not to get the universe actually to center upon the human. And by when I say center upon, I mean it is, the universe is aiming to bring forth another form of life that will carry life forward. So that's always been the case. The universe is always looking to center upon itself in particular ways. So our challenge is not to get the universe to center upon ourselves or the human. Our challenge is to learn how to consciously participate in that centering. That's the challenge. How can we, as humans, actually enter into a participation that would be beneficial in this power of centration? It's taking place. How can we participate? Probably the most important way is to remove the obstacles to this participation. It's deeply natural, but we have constructed obstacles to the participation. Removing the obstacles and the power of centration can proceed. That's the first step. What are the obstacles? The obstacle that has to be talked about is modern industrial consciousness. Modern industrial consciousness is a very particular form of shaping the human. It's one form. And the way it's designed right now is to block our participation in the power of centration. And I mean, it's easy for me to say that. I mean, like anybody can say it. But I mean, how to actually move into that, that's the question. And so one way I suggest that you think about this is to consider an earlier moment when human consciousness had to go through a fundamental change like this. It took place in the 16th century, began in the 16th century with Copernicus. So there was a major change taking place in human consciousness, beginning in the 16th century and then moving around the planet, right? I think a way to think about this, because it's like, Copernicus, that's an idea, yeah, okay, Earth goes around the sun, got it. But I mean, to really move into what it was like for the people then. So it's 1550s, 1544. It's southern France, all right? And you're hanging out there in the village, and this guy shows up, horseback, or walks into town. And he makes this announcement. Everyone, it turns out the Earth is going around the sun. It turns out the Earth is a ball, and it's actually spinning around every day. And when it spins around, that's why it looks like the sun is going around the Earth. It's just a ball spinning. Okay, you're trying to take this in. Your entire life, you've been taught something different. I mean, like all over the place. It's not just mom and dad. It's the religion. It's everything. Your society has been teaching you and forming one particular way, and it's a good way. It's a great way to be, because in this way, the Earth is here, all right, and then the sun's up there, and everything goes around us. It's fantastic. And the stars are nearby, and right behind the stars, they're just real close by. You can't quite hit them with a rock, but they're not that far away. And then right behind them is God, and God's looking down, and God is loving us, and it's just such a great world. It's a great world. It's a cozy world. Nobody wants to leave that world. I mean, that's a good world. I mean, the bad things about the world, but I'm emphasizing the good part. So a guy comes in and says, as a matter of fact, the Earth is a ball. I mean, no way, come on. First of all, if it turns out the Earth is a ball, okay, pal, you argue right into it. If it's a ball, all right, and it's spinning, this is your basic idea, isn't it? Then why isn't the Atlantic Ocean just sort of sloshing over us? No, I mean, so it's like it goes against not only the culture, but it goes against just common sense. So, how do you move into that type of experience? Like I say, not everyone has yet, all right? So there are people holding out, but we have another challenge, and here's the challenge. Someone shows up and says, the universe is organizing itself with an interest in your particular life. That's a challenge. And I'm just trying to be honest about, You know what I think is taking place? The universe actually is organizing. The universe organized itself with an interest in the beings of the universe. There's an interest. There's a concern. And again, just by stating it, it doesn't exactly convince us. We need to enter into a process to embody this understanding, if it's true. See, we need a process. We need a deep process. Now, but look at, if it is the case that the universe is actually interested in centering itself as us, all right? That's the phrase. If that's the case, then modern industrial consciousness really doesn't help. Because I'll give you modern industrial consciousness now. It's what I call the box universe. There's different things you can talk about in describing modern industrial consciousness. But one feature is this. It believes in a box universe. We all do in a certain sense. The box universe is this. The universe consists of a great big place inside of which are other beings, like planets and people and other things. We're inside of this great big box. And Newton added one more feature. He said there's also a universal time, a clock, a universal clock keeping track of the time. There's the box universe. It's a place, we're inside of it, and things are happening. Now, you see, in that conception of the universe, there's no way you can get to the whole as real. The whole isn't real. The whole is just a box. It's just a place. So that I suggest is what is being taught in every university, in every grade school. That's what we're taught. We live in a box universe. It's just like, well, like, where's the news, Brian? I mean, this is, we live in a box universe, so what? But now you have these amazing things that have happened. One of them is Albert Einstein. You just sort of introduce what Albert Einstein. Here's Albert Einstein, who's trained just like the rest of us in this universe, and he realizes it's not a box. This is his amazing insight in the 1905 paper. The universe is not a box. In fact, it's really strange. The space of the universe is dependent upon the observer in the universe. The time of the universe is dependent upon the observer. And it is different for every observer. Different. This is the special theory of relativity. The nature of the universe is relative to the observer. Now, normally when we think of observer, we're thinking of humans. Okay, but that isn't the point. It can be a cockroach. It can be a banana tree. It's a perspective. It's a particular orientation. The universe, in a certain sense, rises up with respect to particular orientations or perspectives. Now, I said the universe. Einstein's only talking about these two major features of the universe I've mentioned so far, space and time. Well, that's pretty fundamental. Just imagine this universe now. If it was just a great big box with a clock, all right, everybody had the same understanding of space and time. Everyone inside the universe has a particular experience of space and time. And it's not that like they're random. They're coherent with one another, but the universe is organizing itself so that everyone is having a very particular experience of space and time. It's incredible. Also, of mass and energy. So that the experience of mass from a very particular perspective, it depends upon the observer. Depends upon the perspective. You start to get a feel, that's how a little strange that is. Wait a minute. Shouldn't the mass of something just be something set? It's just sort of a thing inside the box universe? No, that's not the case. The mass of something, the energy of something, is going to depend upon that someone who is measuring it. So we're already moving into a really different universe. It is. What kind of universe is it? Well, it's like a gluey four-dimensional universe. It's all sort of wrapped up and it has this way of forming around every perspective uniquely. That's Einstein. I mean, okay. So we move on, and consider another really impressive thinker of the 20th century. That's the psychologist Carl Jung. Carl Jung started out life like the rest of us, living inside the box universe. It was all just this place. And then, so his focus was on psychology, the human psyche, the soul. And so he went plummeting down into that experience. But all the way throughout the most of his life, he was talking about the human soul inside of a box universe. Then he came, near the end of his life, he came to a realization of the illusion of the box universe. He broke out of that with his principle he called synchronicity. Synchronicity is his way of saying the universe organizes itself so that our experiences, right, in the universe are filled with personal meaning. The universe organizes itself so that we might find our way into the depths of our individuation. Once again, it's like Einstein. It's like a gluey, interesting, different universe. One where, and I'm drawing out this one particular aspect of it, one where the whole thing actually centers on individual centration. So, just to give you one more name, just to throw out one more name, because I love it so much, is the physicist Freeman Dyson. And he was reflecting upon the universe as a whole, not exactly from Einstein's perspective or Jung's. He was actually looking at from the point of view of what we've learned about the expansion of the universe. It goes under different names, but I like to call it just the elegance of the universe. The other phrases that are used are the fine-tuning of the universe, and even the horrible phrase, the anthropic principle. These are just, we're all sort of searching for some way of expressing what we're learning. But my favorite phrase is the elegance of the universe. And you'll see why. That the expansion of the universe had to be just what it is for the universe to flower forth like it is. If the expansion was slightly slower, the universe would be a black hole now. If it had been faster, the universe would be dust. Now that's just one thing, the expansion. You can look at the strength of the electromagnetic interaction. I mean, you can measure it in the laboratory. There's the strength, right? But if you change that just slightly, the stars wouldn't hold together. Or you change the strong nuclear interaction, you wouldn't have planets. And it's amazing. Everything has this elegance to it. With respect to all of the other things happening in the universe, from beginning to end, it's like it's all just so harmonious and elegant and woven together. So Freeman Dyson's looking at this. And remember, we've just come upon this. We're in a box universe and we're discovering things that are nothing like the box universe. And this is what he came up with. He said, the more I look, the more I study the physical interactions of the universe, and he meant the early universe, the more I study the physical interactions of the early universe, the more I become convinced that in some sense it must have known we were coming. He just had this sense of the universe as aiming toward life. And that's exactly what I'm attempting to talk about here, centration. So the question is this. If we are beginning to escape as one begins to escape this, some of the forms of modern industrial consciousness, and you begin to even imagine the possibility that the universe is hoping or aiming or wanting to center upon itself in a new way. How can we participate with that? How can we actually engage in that? And I just wanted to take the two ideas I mentioned earlier, membrane and catalyst, and just offer two suggestions for how to actually enter into this process directly. Membrane. Membrane is like a barrier that's permeable. And it's the question of what goes through the barrier is determined by the intelligence of the membrane. So it simultaneously makes judgments about what is good and bad. So that's really what we have to consider. We have to find a way of intelligently holding out those elements that will lead to a degradation. And I'm talking about of ourselves, right? I'm talking about of the process of centration taking within us. What elements will actually disrupt that process? Go back in the early seas, you have this life forming. Like what elements had to be blocked out so that this new being could be cooked into existence? Now, it just so happens that we live in a moment of vast destruction, taking place primarily by industrial societies. So that means then that we have to be so intelligent to be able to identify what elements of our society, the society that gave birth to us, what elements of our society have to actually be blocked out. A society can become kind of like a machine. It's this vast network of interactions this vast network that's focused on its own perpetuation, so that the destruction that's being carried out on the planet right now is being sustained by our society, and our society is working to make sure it can continue the destruction. It's a subtle and deep process. So, like I say, the first question has to be what elements are, in subtle ways, that we allow into our lives that actually drag us away from the power of centration. They decenter us. They pull us into the process of participating. So identifying those elements and refusing to actually give them energy, refusing to actually carry out some of these deeds in the world, whatever element of destruction it might be, blocking that out is, I think, the first step. If you just find a way to extirpate these elements and allow the natural power of centration to take place, that would be a huge step forward. Then the other part of it is identifying those elements that actually will enhance your own journey into yourself. What are they? What elements will amplify that activity? Not just sort of open ourselves to everything by any means, but just like to imagine yourself in that sea, that early sea, and if you can bring in those elements that will amplify this movement and keep out those elements that will degrade you, then that actually will enable the power itself to blossom as you. So to say a little bit more on this idea of catalyst, another way to talk about catalyst is to talk about finding a way to contact primordial energy. It's almost a too fancy of a phrase, contacting primordial energy, or you can simply say contacting nature. Now I'm trying to address something that is difficult, because it's almost as if we have to find a way to contact the universe beneath language, to allow ourselves just to drop beneath language, because so much of the language is designed actually for the destruction of the planet. We can get into that, but that's not the point. It's to find a way to just drop away and to contact the universe directly beneath language. And in this sense, again, using this idea that the universe is longing to center itself in a new way, so that the universe is conveying the wisdom that we need, but it can't come exactly through certain forms of modern thought. It has to come from a more ancient source, and so it's finding a way to awaken a more ancient capacity or sensitivity. And how to do that? Well, what's a suggestion? One would be spend time in summer electrical storms. Right? Okay. Let the hours pass while the waves crash on the shore. Just let them pass, and allow nature itself, allow the larger dynamics of life to draw us into contact. Now, outside of modern industrial consciousness, not as stuff we're going to manipulate, not as stuff that's beneath us, right? But rather as our matrix, our womb, that which gave birth to us, and that which is actually longing to communicate. Longing to communicate at the level of feeling, at the level of energy, at the level of eros, at the level of touch. And if you can't make it to the ocean, then buy a bird feeder and put it outside your window and let the birds come and just let the hours go by. They're all attempting to speak to us. You see, the suggestion here is this. Find a way to channel this energy. That's what the creation of a membrane is. That's what the identification of a catalyst is. It's about energy. This energy has been roaring for 13.7 billion years, and now it's roaring into our lives. And our participation then is to construct ways, construct a mountain that will actually shape the flow of the river. In a certain sense, it's like this. Here's the universe. It has a task. It has to give birth to these beings, this particular being. And it labors for 13.7 billion years. But right at the last second, it invites the particular being into the shaping itself. That's the amazing thing about human consciousness. At the last moment, we are asked to participate by shaping the energy and by creating these, like I call them, psychic membranes. So that every day there is this flow of great art into our lives. Every day. Every day there's contact with major Earth system, like the wind, like breath. But to remember it in terms of the larger planet, the whole. And so that, it's kind of incredible. It's a universe that gives birth to itself in new forms. And the human participation is by consciously entering into that construction activity. And so I think in a certain sense is a way to imagine what education is, what real human development is. A way of really completing this whole ancient task. Last thing I want to talk about then would be the way in which the power of centration manifests in human qualities. So how to identify people that actually are deeply involved with the power of centration, whether or not they call it that, and how to identify those qualities that will surface within us as we actually consciously participate in this. Each of the powers has a different kind of feel, different sort of qualities. So it's just a way of noticing and possibly amplifying this work of centration. First, power of centration first is confidence. A person who is entering into the way in which the universe is centering upon him or herself has a well of confidence. Why? Because there's the feeling that one is actually rooting oneself in energies that go back to the beginning of time. It's not just sort of an idea, but it's a feeling, and it's so confidence just arises. It's not exactly confidence in the small self. It's confidence in the small self and the great self simultaneously, because one feels the partnership and the participation there. There's no particular order here, but another quality would be freedom. In particular, the freedom from social forces of conformity. So long as we live in modern industrial consciousness, so long as we think that society is really the beginning and end of our shaping, then it's difficult to find your way outside of social forces. But to contact a deeper shaping energy, and one that actually locks in a personal sense, is to find the courage actually to be who you are. So that centration leads to a power of, the quality of freedom and, I would just say courage. Courage. Make it forward. Another quality is a kind of joy at being a cause. I just love this. It's everything that happens in the universe happens through centers. Everything. All through centers. And this happening is taking place through particular beings. They can be groups of beings, but it's always through a center. So that for things to happen in this universe means through someone like yourself. And so there's the centration leads to just the sheer joy of being a cause. Because that is being the universe. And the sense of, it's the joy of recognizing that you're the entire universe. Because it took all 13.7 billion years, you're drawing upon all of that, it's all brought together, and then the universe wants to do this. So it's the joy of stirring things up, making things happen. That's one of the qualities of centration. Another is focus. Not all the powers lead to focus, but centration leads to an immense, can lead to an immense focus. Another one, you can see they're kind of related one to another, but this is one of my favorites, is there's a kind of, when you come across a centrated person, or a person well into the process of centration, I should say right here, the process never ends. It's an ongoing process. You don't suddenly become centrated. I take that back. But a person who's well into the process of centration, there's a kind of glow at being at the center of things. It's just, as opposed to the anxiety of sort of really wondering what they're doing next door, It's just like, whoa, this is so great. And even when I feeling of when a person can feel there's no other age, no other era, no other epoch where one would have this kind of joy. Because then the personal reality just folds right into the cosmic and historical reality. This is the center of your being. And this is where it's going to happen or nowhere else. It's just like, wow, this feels good. So I thought I'd give a couple negative ones as well. So I am not entirely one-dimensional. And that would be, centration in an immature form. An immature form of centration is an intense, narcissistic self-focus coming from the inability to actually imagine another perspective, only centered in the self. And interesting about a narcissist, narcissists just hate criticism because it'll force them actually to imagine another perspective. So it's just like, oh God, the horror of that. I had the thing all worked out, And then, and in particular, especially go back to the myth, a narcissist hates to be in the gaze of another because if you're being studied and analyzed, and maybe your position is not the total one. And I think it's just so true of our society as a whole. Industrial society is narcissistic in that we don't want to even begin to imagine what the other species think of us. We don't even want to begin to think that. Or what other groups of humans think of us. It's just too terrible. Because then we'd be forced to actually see how narcissistic we are in our self-images such that we don't want to entertain that. That would be one, an immature form of centration. Another would be grandiosity. Kind of related, but it's a little more energy to it. And grandiosity and self-absorption. But I don't want to end with the qualities with a negative one, so I want to go back to a positive one. And the positive one, last quality, would be a feeling of realizing that when one begins to realize that the universe, in its seamlessness, right, is attempting now to give birth to you, right? To begin with that state of seamlessness, or to live in that Z state, feels like the ultimate exhilaration. That too is the power of centration. It's the exhilaration of a child seeing the ocean for the first time. It's just, that's what the primordial energy of the universe feels like. It's a feeling of exhilaration. A last comment. I've been talking about the power of centration, but the word can actually throw us off a little bit. Maybe it should be called omnicentration. Because, you see, the power of centration means that the universe is centering in each being, everywhere. So it's an omnicentration event. So the way to remember this is kind of remarkable. It's like the universe has given us clues. If you look at the universe from any particular galaxy, you find that the universe is expanding from that galaxy. Now, this is like a major discovery in the 20th century. It's not that the expansion is taking place inside of a box. Once again, no matter what galaxy you look at, actually a cluster of galaxies, whatever cluster you look at, the expansion is from that place. So every cluster of galaxy is at the center. So it's an amazing universe. It centers upon itself all over the place. Omnicentricity. But likewise, if you look at in the Earth community, if you look at any species, every species is right at the center of the ecological web. Every species has its own particular significance. It's central in its own particular way. Life, too, has this omnicentricity, or omnicentration. And so then the way in which we reflect on that, I think, in our personal reality is that every being in the universe is a being of something like immense significance. It's central in ways that we may not recognize. But that would be the kind of the ground assumption of this cosmology. Every being, every culture, immense significance. And what sort of the last thing to mention then would be that, amazingly, in the very process of centering upon ourselves, in that process, we're led to unite with other centers. In the process of centering upon ourselves, we are led into a deep union with other centers, a deep union that leads to deep love and deep creativity. And the depth of the love depends upon the depth of the centration. The depth of the creativity depends upon the depth of the centration. The deepest love is only possible between beings that are involved with centration. But already that moves us into another power of allurement, the power between centers, and so we will get to that.